The Colts continue into the Joe Flacco era, but one of the NFL's best teams is in the way this week in the Buffalo Bills. The Bills, on the other hand, have a date with the Chiefs awaiting them after this one. So what will this matchup look like? Let's get to it.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
All right. Thanks for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is the collaboration of your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts and Buffalo Bills, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And Crossover Thursday, as always, is presented by PrizePicks. Download the app and use code LOCKEDONNFL to win $50 instantly when you play just $5. What's up, everybody? This is Jake Arthur of Locked On Colts, joined by Joe Marino of Locked On Bills. And we are here to walk you through this Colts-Bills Week 10 Sunday matchup. And this is one, Joe, that probably had a little more luster on it at the beginning of the year. A lot going wrong with the Colts and the Bills. It's going great. I think both of these teams have probably defied expectations at this point. I think people thought more of the Colts, and, with some of the turnover that the Bills had this offseason, I think they're exceeding preseason expectations. But going into this one, is this how you envisioned this matchup looking at all from a Bills perspective?
Well, I think from the Bills side of things, I'm not super surprised that they're having a good season. They've kind of been one of the upper echelon AFC teams since 2020. And I thought a lot of the preseason conversations about the Bills and whether their window to compete was kind of short-sighted. The Bills are a regime, right, in Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane that's in year 8. There's a process in place here for developing talent. And within the life cycle of the team, you're naturally going to have to say goodbye to some players. And you look at the exodus of players, and it's Tre'Davious White, who just got traded for a bag of balls. Jordan Poyer, who, if you've watched the Dolphins all year, he's really struggled. Gabe Davis, who cares? Stephon Diggs, the Bills kind of needed to move on there, and I think Stephon Diggs needed to move on. So there's this thought of these players that they are no longer having, but we're not talking about the prime version of those guys. They had players in place that were ready to kind of step in, and that's what happens when you have success and you have a system in place and there's continuity with your coaching staff. You got players that'll step in, and of course, Josh Allen still exists. And I thought some of that was maybe wishful thinking from some rivals, a lot of hype for the Jets that was always unfounded in anything that made sense to me. So I'm not really surprised that the Bills are having the season that they are. I think maybe the bigger surprises for me are riding with the rest of the division and maybe in some aspects the rest of the conference.
Yeah, so with this Bills team, it seems like everything is clicking. Like, it doesn't seem they really struggle in any one particular area. I think they seem pretty opportunistic. Like, statistically, offense and defense, they kind of rank right in the middle of the pack. But scoring, both offense and defense, is up for them. They're top 5 in offense, at least. It just seems like when they need to make those plays, they do it. And to me, that's kind of the mark of a good team.
I think efficiency has been the name of the game for the Bills this year, particularly on the offensive side of the football. They're very balanced. They run the ball extremely well. They've developed this zone rushing offense that, in terms of success rate, is one of the best in the entire NFL, and it's been ascending here week over week. And then Josh Allen has really played smart football, mature football for Josh Allen. He's always been certainly a big-time talent, a lot of production. He's really found a lot of efficiency this year under Joe Brady, without Stephon Diggs, without Gabe Davis, a new-looking supporting cast. And it's unlocked, to me, a level of Josh Allen's game that really just aligns him with doing the smart right thing with the football a whole lot more often. He's not really big play hunting. He's taking it when it's there. They have a good system to get the ball out of his hands quicker, good yards after catch team. In some ways they've I wouldn't say that they've changed Josh Allen. He still does all the cool stuff that Josh Allen does. He still gets outside the pocket and makes you pay. He still launches the ball down the field. But I think within that, there's been just a more mature effort from Josh to get the ball out of his hands into the hands of playmakers, allow them to make plays with the ball in their hands. The Bills are really good with yards after catch. And so they've been really efficient on the offensive side of the football. And defensively, they are very much a big play defense. They want to play up the field with their front, They want to take away explosive fields with their coverage shells and count on you at some point to make a mistake, or at some point they're going to be able to use that up the field style to make a play behind the line of scrimmage and put the offense behind the sticks. And of course, that's going to get teams out of schedule and reduce scoring. So they have this model that they embrace, and there's some new faces in different places, but still a recipe that works in terms of winning in the NFL.
Yeah, not gonna lie, this offense, it hurts my feelings a little bit. Josh Allen not getting sacked, not turning the ball over. I was a big Ray Davis guy coming into the draft. They got well-balanced run game. It seems like Keon Coleman a little banged up, but still, he's coming along. Khalil Shakir. So I'm a little jealous from this perspective. Things aren't going as well for the Colts. But defensively, from a Colts perspective, we're just looking for the offense to find any sort of rhythm, any identity whatsoever. Obviously, going against Brian Flores last week in the Vikings, probably not the greatest speed bump to start out with when establishing a new identity on offense. But for the Buffalo defense, is there any vulnerable area where Joe Flacco might be able to exploit something?
Well, I would say I think the Bills' secondary talent matches up pretty good with the receiving core that Indianapolis is going to present. The Bills have big, athletic, physical corners, and Rasul Douglas and Christian Benford, a great slot player. I know the Colts enjoy Kenny Moore. The Bills enjoy Taron Johnson, really good slot corners. And so I think you think about Alec Pierce and Josh Downs in the slot, and of course Michael Pittman. I think the Bills kind of match up fairly well with those types of players. I think if I'm Indy and I'm getting excited about my opportunities against the Bills defense, it's with Jonathan Taylor running the football. The Bills are a defense that gives a lot of light boxes. They're concerned about taking away explosive plays, and so they're going to run base nickel. Taron Johnson's going to be a slot corner and a Sam linebacker, right? And so they're small, they're light on defense, and they're willing to concede rushing production. Taron Johnson actually, after the game last week against the Miami Dolphins, where they gave up 149 rushing yards and felt like it. It wasn't like they had explosive plays. I think their longest run was 16 yards. Like they were just gashing the Bills left and right, running the ball. Taron Johnson said, well, they have explosive playmakers on the outside. We were fine letting them run the ball. And the Bills will do that, right? And they've done that a lot. And I think that happened the last time these two teams played in the regular season. So I think this is, from the Colts perspective, challenge the Bills' defensive structure that is going to present light boxes, that's going to play with smaller defensive players, and see if your physical running back can really make them pay for that. And then I think, of course, through that, you maybe pull that extra safety down and start to get your opportunities down the field. So I think this has got to be a run-heavy offensive game plan for Shane Steichen and company.
I think they would like to do that. I mean, it seems like they really want to establish Jonathan Taylor times. They tried to last week. You're in a lot early, and then they kind of bailed on that. And in the whole middle of the game, they didn't really run it as much. But no, I think they would like to do that. Jonathan obviously has done well against the Bills, even though some faces have changed. But I mean, obviously, Joe Flacco's a big-time veteran, 17 years or so in the league. The running game is always going to be a quarterback's friend, no matter how experienced you are. So that's certainly something we're looking ahead to. The Colts they did use a bit more 12 personnel last week, but how much of that was, Bernard Ryman being out and needing to, support your super young, kind of rookie-laden offensive line at the time. So yeah, that'll be interesting to see. How is Buffalo over the middle of the field in the passing game, though? Tight ends for the Colts have been almost non-existent. So I'm not even counting on that becoming a thing. But when it comes to like Josh Downs over the middle, or Michael Pittman Jr., who physically he seems like kind of a shell of himself because of his back injury right now, but he's still playing through it and is still effective over the middle when given the opportunity. So is Buffalo give anything there?
Well, I think there's probably some opportunities, but Terrell Bernard, the Bills middle linebacker, is a very good coverage player, and his ability to kind of roam in the middle of the field and has really good vision, reads the backfield well, and just kind of caps routes. He's super good at that. And I think that he'll kind of take care of a lot in addition to Taron Johnson. Now, there is a player in Dorian Williams, Matt Milano, the Bills, star linebacker, biceps injury during training camp. He's not going to be back until December. And so in place of him is Dorian Williams, a second-year player out of Tulane, who's really athletic, super good downhill player, like physical, high-effort guy. But, yeah, he's victim to some coverage blunders from time to time. And whether that's kind of biting up on some play fakes and vacating a lot of space that he's responsible for, or just, squeezing and exchanging routes in zone coverage, there's mistakes. And so I think if you're going to work the middle of the field, that's probably, you say, where's Waldo? It's Dorian Williams when you want to throw the football. So that would be the opportunity that I'd be looking for if I was Indianapolis and I wanted to work the middle of the field, is what opportunities can you get against Dorian Williams and make him the guy that you go after.
Yeah, we'll certainly see what they try to do. We'll talk about more of that in a moment. Can we make sense out of what the Colts have tried to do or what they might try to do this Sunday at home against the Bills? Pre-alcohol probiotic drink by Zbiotics is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make Zbiotics your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. Here's how it goes. Step 1, drink the pre-alcohol. And for the best results, make pre-alcohol your very first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly, as always, of course, but pace yourself, hydrate, and get a good night's sleep. And then step 3, of course, is to enjoy your next day. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL to learn more and get 15% off of your first order when you use Locked On NFL at checkout. Zbiotics is backed with 100% money back guarantees, so if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code LockedOnNFL at checkout for 15% off. All right, Joe. So let's look at the Colts side of things. Very interesting team, very underwhelming, I think, for a lot of people, and a bit of a mystery. So from your perspective, when you look at this thing, I'm sure you've got some head scratchers and some questions on this one.
Well, yeah, I think we got to start with the quarterback position, and I know that your listeners are probably very accustomed to your thoughts and takes on Joe Flacco and Anthony Richardson, but obviously Shane Steichen believes that Joe Flacco gives the Colts, their best chance to win football games in what's a pretty muddy situation when it comes to the wild card opportunities, right? The Colts, for how uneven they've been, they're 4-5, and I think there's like 9 teams in the conference that are within a game of 500. It's like 4-5 is not a great spot to be, but it's also not a terrible spot to be right now. What are you seeing from Joe Flacco that is giving Shane Steichen the thought that, yeah, this is what we got to do in terms of him being our quarterback over Anthony Richardson?
Yeah, so he came in for two games and some change for Anthony Richardson earlier in the season, and he was just on a tear, particularly on third downs and like in the fourth quarter, was moving the ball really, really well. Was still hitting on the big plays that Anthony Richardson was as well, but also filling in some of the gaps on the small details that is really necessary. That just the short game, the screen passes, dump offs, finding yards in between boom or bust, essentially. Because with Anthony, it was either 50-yard shot play or a 3 and out. Did some nice things on early downs to get the ball running, but I think the plan was for Joe Flacco to establish a little more rhythm and just kind of eliminate some of the peaks and valleys, just get some consistency. And with how hot and cold Anthony Richardson was, it had been really cold in the last few weeks leading into him being benched. And if you're Shane Steichen, you probably just want to go with the guy who you at least think can execute a game plan more and be able to adjust things on the fly. Because with Anthony, I felt at a certain point, you just didn't know what you were going to get anymore. So when it comes to utilizing a guy like Josh Downs to help move the sticks or, get through the reads and find Michael Pittman Jr. over the middle of the field while still getting to Alec Pierce over the top for the big plays, I just felt like Joe Flacco is who they thought gave them the best chance. Now, it leaves a big mystery as to like what's this whole season about then, because you kind of needed the whole year to evaluate Anthony Richardson to decide how to move forward in 2025. And now the plan is, if all goes to plan, it's Joe Flacco the rest of the year. Like, they will not see Anthony Richardson the rest of this season if they have it their way. Now, if all goes terribly wrong, we've seen they're willing to make quarterback changes, but we even asked on Monday, like, does Joe Flacco have that limit to his performance like Anthony Richardson did? And Shane was like, no, we're still going with Joe for now. So, hopefully they can tailor some sort of offense. I mean, it's going to be more of a traditional offense. There was more 12 personnel, more under center stuff than really we'd seen in the small sample of Shane Steichen's tenure here in Indy so far. But we'll see how it goes. I mean, they have the good run game, the good offensive line, although it's banged up, and they've got some capable pass catchers. So we'll see if they can put something together that's productive with any sort of consistency. But certainly Sunday against the Vikings was not a great debut for their new quarterback era.
Jake, I'm pretty sure Bills Mafia is still having nightmares over what Jonathan Taylor did to them in 2021. Over 200 yards from scrimmage, 5 touchdowns, 41-15. Colts win. Yikes! It was tough. I know that JT hasn't quite had the same production that he did his first couple of seasons. Catch us up on Jonathan Taylor and how he's performing. And again, Bills Mafia is not excited about playing this guy.
No, I mean, he's still there. I mean, he had the 2 or so seasons where he was really banged up. He had the ankle, he had the thumb, he had this and that. The guy is still there. I mean, week 18 last year against the Bills, the Texans, final game of the season, he had like 170, 180 yards rushing. He's had some really productive 100-yard games this year. That I think what you're seeing with him now is almost an evolution of his game. He still does have breakaway speed. He's probably not beating everyone down the field like he did at one point, but he is still fast and can still get downfield. But one of the best parts about his game now is he runs a lot between the tackles, but he gets really small, and his patience to wait on blocking where he knows it's going to be is awesome. It's become one of his absolute best attributes. So he still creates his own yards. We're still waiting on that 150, 200-yard game that we know he's capable of. But there's been so much inconsistency around him and I mean, he himself missed a couple games recently too. But defenses just know that he's the first one they have to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And so until the passing game gets any semblance of a consistent threat, I think teams are going to load up against him. It sounds like from what you're saying, though, this may be a good matchup from a team that doesn't necessarily load up the box and kind of defends the big plays through the pass game. We'll see. I mean, Flacco has got to be able to take advantage of that. Otherwise, even a team like Buffalo might just say, we're just going to go ahead and drop an extra man down and beat the Colts that way, because the Colts have not shown that they can beat teams consistently through the air.
Well, it's going to be an interesting choice that the Bills will make. I think a big part of the Bills script that they like to have is, you can have your rushing yards. We want to take away your explosive plays, but the key part for that to work is they think they can score, right? That they have to score points, or else teams will stay running the football, and then eventually they'll snatch your soul. Hello, 2021, 41-15, Colts win. Now, one of the interesting storylines for the Colts is this offensive line injuries, right? Ryan Kelly, outstanding center, he's on injury reserve. I think there's probably going to be 2 rookie starters. I think Raymond, he missed last week with a concussion. Catch us up here on what's going on with this Colts offensive line and your expectations for Sunday.
Yep. So we know for certain that Ryan Kelly will be out. He's on IR now with a knee injury. Shane Steichen just clarified that for us this afternoon. So he's on IR. They think he's going to be back. So it's minimum of 4 games. So Tanner Bortolini is going to be the guy in the middle. He's already had to play a few games this year, and he's actually played pretty well. He's graded pretty high. I think he's PFF's 6th best rookie offensive lineman right now, number 1 in pass blocking. He's only given up 1 pressure so far. So he's done pretty well. We'll see how it looks over an extended period of time. But he's just got more strength than what Kelly's showing right now. And he's still, Bortolini was an athletic prospect, so he moves around pretty well. So he's done well. Right guard, this one was really a shame because Will Fries was playing the best football of his life. He suffered a lower leg injury. In comes rookie undrafted free agent Dalton Tucker. who was a great story in the summer, a rookie undrafted free agent who could crack this offensive lineup. He's done all right. He's probably not a guy that like you want to plan to be the starter moving forward necessarily, but I think he's probably the best option they've got there at right guard, and he's still doing pretty well, I think, for the circumstance, being a rookie undrafted free agent. Bernard Ryman, so he did miss the game last week with a concussion. He's been cleared to return to practice, so he was out there at practice today. Still has to get through all the steps of the protocol, but certainly with it being the first day of the week and him being able to practice, I mean, it certainly looks like it's trending towards him playing. Matt Gonzalez filled in for him last week, first career start, really his first extended action, because they just haven't needed, depth at tackles or anyone really to step up at tackle behind the starters this year. But he played pretty well also, particularly in pass protect. Well, he allowed 1 sack in pass protection, a few pressures. It was the run blocking that he, I think, graded out pretty well in. But these guys are the future. I mean, for the short term, that doesn't really matter. But Bortolini, I think, is their long-term option at center. Ryan Kelly's a free agent after this year. And then Dalton Tucker, we'll see, because Will Fries is a free agent also. But, he was an ascending player before he got hurt.
Yeah, I like Bortolini. He was one of my favorite, hopeful day 3 picks to add. And I'm unsurprised that he's come in and been successful. And I think that's a good succession plan. I think he'll be a good player for the Colts for a while. Jake, this Colts defensive front looks pretty good to me. Grover Stewart's a dog. DeForest Buckner's a dog. Zaire Franklin's a dog. EJ Speed's a good player. They got high picks on the edge. Break down this front for us. Is there any weak links, or is everyone just big, strong, athletic, and a problem to deal with?
Well, it certainly works better when DeForest Buckner's in there. He was on IR. He left in week 2, had a high ankle sprain, but he returned a couple weeks ago, and he's really brought that group together. You could just tell a difference in Grover Stewart, especially when Buckner's out there.
Yeah,
the freedom and confidence that Stewart plays with when Buckner's out there, incredible. You saw in that play with the Vikings where he just took Garrett Bradbury off his feet and then did the same exact thing to Sam Darnold. And then Kenny Moore comes and scoops it and scores. So that's the type of impact when Buckner gets back in there. So he provides that interior pass rush that quarterbacks hate so much. But it opens up things for a guy like Laiatu Latu, for example. Never looks better rushing the passer than when he's doing it right next to Buckner. He's capable. He's got that tool belt of moves coming out of UCLA. I think he's still working on how he has to use those against NFL level talent, because he could kill everyone in the Pac-12.
Yeah,
but it's obviously kind of a different beast when you're doing it against a 6-year NFL left tackle. But he's coming along okay. Kwity Paye is as well. Quity's probably not like the top defensive end first round talent you wanted him to be, but he's still like a productive player. He's a good run defender, and he's going to get you at least a couple pressures each game. He got a sack last week. But Dayo Adangbo is the guy who, very streaky player, but when he's on a heater, he really gets it going. And right now he's playing well. He is a kind of a matchup nightmare. Big, long, athletic. He knows how to beat, tackles and interior guys inside and out. Like he's got a lot of moves that he works on as well. Has kind of a deadly rip, and he's getting kind of a good swim move to him as well. But once you get past the starters, especially on the interiors, when it gets a little more vulnerable for the Colts, Raekwon Davis and Taven Bryan and Adetomiwa Adebawore, when those guys are on the field, teams tend to smell blood in the water and they start running it down the Colts' throat. And then once Buckner and or Grover Stewart get back out there, they kind of readjust their game plan. But if you see the dogs leave the field, then there's Buffalo's probably going to want to try and take advantage of that right up the middle.
Last one I have for you here is a question about the Colts secondary. I've been a little surprised by their personnel decisions. I feel like they've had upgrade opportunities and maybe went with other areas of their roster. Mm-hmm. How is it performing? Like, what maybe is somebody who's I follow every team very, very in depth, but I'm not in the weeds, like you are with the Colts. Mm-hmm. Like, maybe fill me in on what I don't know about this Colts secondary that's maybe led to them being reluctant to be more aggressive to add to it.
Yeah, so a couple off seasons ago, they were very intentional about getting young in the secondary. They traded off Stephon Gilmore, and they just kind of let some of their older guys walk. And they drafted 3 corners that year, and they had Nick Cross going into his second year. So they really wanted to get new and young and build their own secondary. The problem with that, though, is they were investing a lot in guys who were, I don't want to say injury prone, but they were hurt a lot of the time. And so all of this last offseason, everyone was screaming that you got to get at least another proven, capable veteran at safety and cornerback because these guys get hurt. And then lo and behold, Juju Brent's their top outside corner, knee injury, done. So that left them vulnerable. Luckily, they picked up Samuel Womack off the scrap heap before the season from the 49ers, and that has worked out pretty well for them. He's been a good player. He's had to start pretty much the whole season. Jalen Jones was a 7th-round pick, one of those guys they drafted I mentioned a couple years ago, playing really, really good ball for a former 7th-round pick. Are they guys who could be upgraded over? Yeah, but they're giving them capable starting snaps. And then at safety, Nick Cross has been a pleasant surprise as well. He was like the youngest player in the league when they drafted him at 20 years old a couple years ago. But he is finally starting to grow into what they wanted him to be. I just think there was a lot of learning he had to do in terms of what he was seeing on an NFL field. And they finally, took the leash off and trusted him to be a full-time starter this year. And it's worked out pretty well. Julian Blackmon, very smart player. He's not making the splashy plays he did during training camp over the summer, but he still is not a guy that's going to get caught out of position. He's going to be where he needs to be pretty much most of the time. Now, I think there's going to have to be some things done in the offseason, even though that's what we just said about this last one. But this is a group that is outperforming expectations right now. Gus Bradley in general has really helped turn this entire defense around since a really, really ugly first few weeks of the season. And the secondary has been a pretty pleasant surprise through it all.
I appreciate that. It's a interesting lineup. It always comes down to matchups, and we'll get into keys of victory here on the other side of it.
Yep, absolutely. All right, guys, get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. In this one, FanDuel has the Bills as 4.5-point favorites. Not been super kind to the Colts lately. Seeing a lot of 5.5-point dogs on this one. But you know what? It's kind of turned out right. And they feel strongly about the Bills in this one again. So go over to FanDuel.com and let them know what you think. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports partner of the NFL. And you guys know that PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long at PrizePicks. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as few as 4 correct picks. And PrizePicks is the best way to get action on sports in over 30 states, which includes California, Florida, Georgia, and Texas. PrizePicks is also the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy so that your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. That means if your player leaves in the first half and they don't return, PrizePicks keeps your lineup live. Because you all know, when you're betting, life isn't fair, and it's always everybody else's fault if you don't come up big. So they got that covered for you. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play 5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus because it's guaranteed. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, that's LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, welcome back to Crossover Thursday, which is presented by Prize Picks. Remember to go to prizepicks.com/lockedonnfl and use code all lowercase lockedonnfl to win $50 instantly when you play $5. All right, Joe. So on the line, the three most important keys for the Bills to win this one.
I think number one is heat up Joe Flacco. You know, this is a quarterback that, like you mentioned, has played 17 years. He's seen every defense in the world. He's seen every disguise. You got to pressure him. And I think you got to try to take advantage of some younger players on that Colts offensive line. You have a lot of depth on your defensive line if you're the Bills. I think there's been times this year I feel like the Bills' pass rush has been pretty quiet. And I don't think that can be the case this week. I think they have to get after Joe Flacco, who obviously is limited in terms of mobility. And so you want to take advantage of that and really heat him up and not give him time to just use his experience and, you know, slice up your zone defense. So that's number one for me. Number two is don't let Jonathan Taylor kill you. You know, the Bills make their choices with how they choose to defend the run. And this is probably a matchup where I would dare Joe Flacco to beat you throwing the football. And I'm not saying that you load up with 8-man boxes or anything like that, but I would be willing to roll down a safety. I'd be willing to run blitz. I'd be willing to do some gap exchanges to try to get some negative plays because I'm sure the Colts want to see it, but nobody wants to see Jonathan Taylor go off like he did last time and certainly how he's capable of performing. And so because of I don't not respect the Colts receivers. I just feel like the Bills do have good matchups with Christian Benford and Rasul Douglas and Taron Johnson. So if you wanted to play a little man coverage, you want to play a little one high, middle of the field, close, single high safety type stuff to help your run fits, do it, because I feel like you can take your chances more with some of the coverage options you have. And so this isn't a game to let Jonathan Taylor go off. I think that would be a mistake. And then number three, I think it's probably a good idea for the Bills to have a pass aggressive game plan on offense. I have a lot of respect for the Colts front on defense, two great defensive tackles and Buckner and Stewart. And you mentioned they're humming right now. I think the second level is really good. They've been inserting this Grant Stewart a little bit, giving them some sparks as a extra player sometimes when they want to go with some more base traditional looks. And so I would be willing to kind of take your chances. I don't know if Keon Coleman's going to go, but they should get Amari Cooper this week. Khalil Shakir is a very good slot receiver, yards after catch. Dalton Kincaid is a tight end option. I think you use your backs out of the backfield. The Bills have had a lot of success throwing the ball to James Cook and Ray Davis. I think you want to come out pass aggressive, a little bit like they did against Seattle, to allow yourself to kind of get that lead and maybe force the Colts to not be two-dimensional on offense and really make it a Joe Flacco game throwing the ball against your secondary. And so I think I'd come out trying to score points through the air and really kind of close the game out in the second half, running it if you can.
No, I think that putting heat on Flacco is legit. You know, last week against the Vikings, they didn't get to him until the final drive of the game. It's like Flores said, we're not messing with this anymore. And then boom, 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 3 sacks on the final drive after not having any. So, I mean, that's legit. I mean, Joe can't really escape all that. But for the Colts side of it, I agree. Jonathan Taylor is kind of the linchpin of this thing. Get him established early and try and ride him throughout the game. The game that still haunts you guys, I think that was a once in a lifetime type of thing. Like that was an enormous game, but I think he's still capable of those 150-yard games. And it doesn't even have to be that. Just use him consistently throughout the game. They just have these long stretches where they abandon using him. And there's not much explanation afterward other than we like what Trey Sermon offers us in this instance and things like that. It's like, all right, Trey Sermon's nice, but he's not Jonathan Taylor. So ride Jonathan throughout the game as long as he's productive and things are working there. And my next point to that, if that is working, allow that to create play action opportunities for you with Joe Flacco. Obviously, this appears like it's going to become a more traditional offense. So, you know, if you're under center and, you know, you can get the play fake to Jonathan and crank back and go to Alec Pierce downfield. I think there's ways for this to work. They also like Alec Pierce on the deep crossers as well. So not everything has to be this big, you know, go route for him, but just try and establish the run game and allow it to create play action opportunities for you. And then the last, obviously this is easier said than done because Buffalo's offense is doing a lot of things right now. Try to affect them in some way that's been uncharacteristic. They're not giving up sacks. Obviously, Josh Allen, the least sacked quarterback right now. and they're not turning it over either. So either get a couple turnovers on them or, get to Josh Allen and make it to where he's not comfortable. Obviously, it seems like the defensive line is probably the best way to do that. But the Colts, they rank up there in takeaways as well. So I think if you can get a little bit of pressure on Josh, maybe make him make some errant throws or just, some questionable decisions, what have you, you could probably force them into uncharacteristic mistakes that they just haven't really been making this year and that have allowed them to win a lot of games.
Yeah, I think the organic pass rush opportunities for the Colts should be interesting. The Bills are really good pass blocking team. Like you mentioned, Josh Allen's the least sacked quarterback in the NFL. But I think that the blend of traits that the Colts defensive line has, a lot of length, a lot of size, a lot of athleticism, you go ahead and rush 4. And I feel like you should be able to cage rush a little bit here and really kind of lock in Josh in the pocket. And, you'll be able to drop 7 and give yourself some chances, if Josh will put it in harm's way. But I think that their organic pass rush should or could be challenging. I don't think the Bills have played this complete of a front. They played teams with good defensive tackles, but really didn't have the edge. Teams with good edge rushers, but not really the interior. This is a team that I feel like can put 4 across that has a lot of talent and juice to really get after you. So I think it'll be a unique matchup in terms of how the Colts can win with their organic pass rush against the Bills, who have been a very good pass pro team.
And, the Colts may not be using Anthony Richardson on the field, but, I think he's simulating a little bit of Josh Allen this week. So that's something that not every opponent has. So, that's a use they could get out of Anthony this week. I just hope they wisely account for his legs, because that, he's one of those unicorns that, okay, he's a really good passer, but what makes him Josh Allen is his ability to use his legs as well. And I don't feel like the Colts have always been super heady of that situation. They have allowed some guys who can move around with their legs to do so freely. So I'm just really hoping the Colts factor that into the game plan a little bit. But that's it for us, everybody. Stay tuned with us throughout the week, right after the game as well. Make us your first stops right after. Joe, where can they find, writing? Obviously you got the podcast going as well. Go ahead and plug yourself a little bit.
Yeah, Joe Marino. You can follow me on X at the Joe Marino, of course, host of Locked On Bills. I have another podcast on the Locked On Network. It's Locked On NFL Scouting, where we cover the entire NFL through the lens of team building. So another listen for you that you can check out on a daily basis here on the Locked On Podcast Network.
Absolutely. And for me and my co-host, Zach Hicks, I'm at Jake Arthur NFL, and he is at Zach Hicks 2. Any Bills fans, we appreciate you kind of spying on the enemy a little bit this week. Colts fans, obviously, Joe produces some great stuff as well. But thank you all for making Locked On Colts and Locked On Bills your first listens today. Now for your next listen, go find the new Locked On NFL. Now with 2 shows every day. First, you're going to get the madman Tyler Rowland, who's going to kick off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso. And then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you don't already, please, follow us on social media. Leave us ratings and reviews as well. That's very helpful. And with that, we will see you guys tomorrow.